Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I just wanted to talk about some news reports that there have been for President-elect Donald Trump to be re-implementing his transgender military ban on day one. Some of them are saying it really is disappointing to hear about. Now, of course, for trans people in the military then, I think that would be a touchy subject within the trans community there. I know within my own networking circles it certainly would be, because of course, thinking about the US military industrial complex, America's interests and such, I don't think that's something that trans people by and large would really stand for. But I imagine it's a bit like in the UK, how there are certain towns and stuff like that where there's very poor schooling, there's not a great deal of resources, again, in places where there's no industry maybe, within different states and stuff like that, where really your only career options would be either go into the military, so you can have access to, of course, their insurance schemes, their pensions in the future, maybe any apprenticeships, like I know that the UK military has access to, so you can go on and have a rewarding career path following your time in the military. And besides from that, your only options could be, depending on the size of the town, the village, or whatever, it could be maybe becoming a police officer. Even more unlikely for a trans person, obviously, or being prison staff, which again it's not a very good job. I think of all of the government jobs or civil service jobs, they tend to have the worst rates for depression and stuff, so that's not really an option. And other than that, again, if you've had not the best resources for schooling and stuff, it could be quite hard to move somewhere where jobs could be more rewarding or more lucrative or whatever, because you might not just be able to get a chance there. So your options can really be limited to really joining the military if you're physically able to, and trying to carve out a life for yourself from that. Or it could be just gig work, or just trying to live day by day there, paycheck to paycheck. So I do understand the reason why some trans people do join the military in any country there, and I do sympathise for any military personnel really who have had to make that choice, that sacrifice for their life there. So it's not really something that I am judging, which again, I worry some trans people might do in a completely pessimistic way, not necessarily having a balanced side on it. I also believe, just from some research that I have done, that with the insurance programs and veteran health care, for example, that there is in the US, especially for military personnel, that can open a lot of doors for transitioning. I believe a lot of gender affirming surgeries are available in veteran healthcare and stuff like that. So again, if you're a young trans person in a very small town of not the best industrial resources, joining the military could really be the only chance that you do have to be able to transition and again carve out a life. And ultimately, regardless of your beliefs of that anyway, these are trans people who have defended their country, and for supporting their country, the US, the country is then again turning its back on them, which is just really disappointing, really frustrating to have to hear for a second time, of course, now, Donald Trump's second presidency he's going to be entering. So this does mean, of course, for the second time, estimates as high as 15,000 people somewhere being US military personnel, and these are trans people, could be having their lives through completely by the wayside. This is going to interrupt, pensions, healthcare, any career aspects possibly after the military, depending on how this ban and the removals are going to function. And again, it's after the first time of already doing it. If I was a trans person in the US, I really wouldn't want to defend my country. But again, there's options there that are limited, of course, and people are having to somehow work out being in the middle of this. And I do feel sorry for the people in the middle of this. It must just be so turbulent for so many families now who are wondering, where from January, where is their medicine going to come from? Are they going to get the surgeries that they booked? What's going to happen to their pensions, their futures? Are they going to wind up homeless? I don't think the US, or really many countries, properly support their veterans anyway. So yeah, so to have this, the options there, what's going to be happening in their life, it really is sad. And the thing is, the first time round that this happened, there are a lot of people who were in support of trans people in the military, not necessarily because they were trans or because of discrimination or whatever, but because it didn't really matter. If you're good at doing your job, if you've got those communication skills, that strength, that support for your platoon there or whatever, then surely you're then the right person for the job. It doesn't come down to your gender identity or your gender reassignment or your sexual orientation, your race or whatever. And yeah, it really is a shame. For people who are transphobic and support this military ban, I really don't understand why a military ban of all things is what it's coming down to. I could imagine maybe it comes down to, the safety debate, about single-sex spaces maybe. So, changing rooms, sleeping quarters maybe, whatever for probably trans women especially that are going to be targeted by those. As, it's always the case, of course, we've got a Supreme Court judgment going on in the UK right now, which is just going to affect trans women mainly at the moment. So, it does happen. We're the ones that tend to be thrown under the bus, annoyingly. And I think there was a quote I could find from Donald Trump specifically, which was about refusing to fund transgender surgery. So I suppose that's what it comes down to again. So again, trans people with limited options choosing to risk their lives and defend their country, not being able to then get the reward of their proper healthcare out of it. I suppose that's what it can come down to for some people as well there, just that it shouldn't be funded at all. And no, it really is a shame. It really is disappointing to have to hear about this. The UK actually had a similar ban in the military. It was for the entire LGBT community, but really it was called the gay ban, really. So, and this was only really lifted in the year 2000. So homosexuality or homosexual acts were partially decriminalised from 1967. But as late as the year 2000, you could still be banned from the military, and it was very serious the way that we did it. So if you were found to be gay, you'd be thrown out of the military. You'd have to go through all sorts of suffering and humiliation in that removal process there. So investigations and stuff like that. I think a lot of the time. So one woman comes to mind, Janet Smith from the Royal Air Forces. They were her authorities, her superiors, were told of her being gay from an anonymous phone call. So it comes from outing from people that want to ruin lives, really. And again, you suffer all of that humiliation, ultimately, again, for trying to carve a life out of yourself and possibly patriotic beliefs too of supporting your family, or well, not your family, your country, if that's what it comes down to for some people as well. And this typically happened through dishonourable discharge. And I don't know if that's something that possibly happens in the US or what it would be like in the US. But what dishonourable discharge is again, it's almost like the worst thing that could happen, the worst type of punishment you could have in the military, where you're thrown out, your pay is forfeited, you're not able to re-enlist. A lot of LGBT people in the UK had their medals stripped, which was particularly disappointing, of course, and really damaging, again, for a lot of people. Being dishonourably discharged does count as a criminal conviction. So again, it ruins people's livelihoods, not just from losing your first job in the military, but also, it's going to affect finding a new job as well, because it's a criminal conviction ultimately. And yeah, it just causes all sorts of damage and humiliation and suffering. At the moment in the UK, there's been a pension scheme that's been allocated for I think it's about 4,000 veterans who had, I assume, their pensions and healthcare or whatever ceased from being found out to be gay or LGBT and removed from the UK military. It's nowhere near enough. It's somewhere about £12,000 as the total fund. So there's a lot of veteran charities arguing for the government that's way too low. And it definitely is way too low. But we've had something similar in the past, and not that long ago. Again, in the year 2000, you could be banned and dishonourably discharged from the military in the UK. And I think as late as the year 2022, there are still UK ex-military personnel who had been banned, who had been removed, who still had that dishonourable discharge conviction on their criminal record. So again, it was still damaging their lives in some minor way, even though in 2023 it was that the government officially apologised. So it's had generations of effects, really, of damage. And it's so sad for the US to be causing this again there. It's going to cause lifelong damage for thousands of trans people. And yeah, it just is so upsetting. It is really disappointing to have to hear about this and just where it could lead to the trans people this is going to affect winding up. And what happens next too, because it's not as if the US doesn't have a history of LGBT related discrimination. Are they going to be removed next? Is it going to go back to the Jim Crow laws where a black nurse or doctor in the military isn't allowed to treat a white person? Like, where's it going to end up? How bad is this going to get in the US now? It really is worrying there, and it is something that I did just want to talk about. And ultimately, it is discrimination through and through. Not only is it discrimination, but of course it is life ruining, it's life shortening, and it could even be killing her. It could be a social homicide in some people, again, if they wind up homeless or such, without their medical assistance or whatever, if they're living with disabilities being a veteran. It's going to be so damaging. And it's just so bad to think about how far we've come in the past, what you'd think, let's just say for the sake of argument, 60 years from the partial decriminalisation in the UK. And, the appeal of our own UK military ban just 24 years ago. And whilst it was a very long time ago, it feels like in some respects, we're still not that far away from it being brought up again, from it all going back to that stage. So yeah, it's really just frustrating. And I did want to talk about this. Thank you for finding the time to watch this. I hope this has been maybe educational or insightful in some way. Please do leave a comment about your own experiences of discrimination for any reason in the workplace, whether that be the military or otherwise. And if you have found this video useful, do take a look at the next video that you're seeing suggested popping up on your screen, and maybe the playlist as well that's showing up too if you want to just find out a few more videos. There are a few more things that I've had to talk about. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Good night.